So, really delighted to be able to introduce you to Seda, who is going to talk to you about stock for data now. So, Seda, do come up and join us on stage. Thank you so much. So the slides, you just move along with the...
Okay, thank you so much.
Move along.
So, hello, I'm Seda Basihos. It's spelled Basihos in Turkish, but you can say the Basihos. And sorry, by the way, the title doesn't appear as in a PDF format, but I just converted to a PowerPoint now. But the title is Stock for Data, Redistribute and Rebuild.
Could we turn the sound up a little bit? Or get the microphone? I can't really hear you, Paul.
So is it better?
That's not the microphone. This is the microphone.
No, that's only for the...
That doesn't broadcast to the room, that mic, sorry, that's just for the Zoom.
Sounds like you just need to speak up, sorry.
Yeah, if you just speak up, that'd be great.
Okay.
Projecting.
So, for once can hear me, the title is Stock for Data, Redistribute and Rebuild. So, actually, when I was preparing my slides, always put the first page after when I'm done with the job, but this is the first presentation, I decided the very first page of the slides. So, because sometimes it's better to go back to basics. And Schumpeter once says that entrepreneurial spirit is a pillar of capitalism. Because we know that in a very long run, but after Industrial Revolution, it gets much bright. Okay, so it pays up. So as we know, the industrialization brought railroads, steam engines, and then oil and electricity enabled the rise of giant firms like General. Using this sort of technologies. Now we are living in the digital era, right? The smart technologies, robotics, and AI just powered some type of firms to the top, which we call tech giants, basically. So I just try to be representative here and try to put different tech giants from a different part of the world, but still they are multinational, by the way. So even if their headquarters are located in some places, they run their operations globally, we know that one. So, but other than this, other than being multinational, what are the other features of these tech giants? So literature proves that they are innovative and productive, and they are having high markups, they are capital intensive, and they are highly profitable. So even these 5 big techs, Amazon, Apple, Google, Meta, and Microsoft account for nearly 25% of the total market capitalization. This is huge, by the way. So it's the first maybe in a recorded history for any kind of big firms. So I just put the figure, and this is from Thomson Reuters, and I just compared their market capitalization. I also put the Tencent, I don't know, the Chinese multinational firm, technology firm, and as you can see, their market capitalization is much, much bigger than the other top 200 firms. I mean, the average market capitalization of other top 200 firms. But this is a little bit controversial because the market capitalization may not tell so much about their profitability. Some financial people, also economists, also check their revenues because there are lots of metrics about the profitability, and sometimes we just divide the market capitalization by revenues and try to understand how much they're profitable. So I don't want to confuse you here, but we know that this is an empirical fact. It's more than worth. Those firms profits in a great amount when we compare to the firms from the last generation. By generation I mean from the last technological era. So this created by some technology website. Just try to understand how much does big tech make every minute. It's really huge, I think. It's a $500,000 per minute. And as you can see here, there are Alphabet, Microsoft, Facebook, Tesla, Netflix. These are all firms that produce products and services that have smart technologies embedded in them. Okay, so why did I talk about all of this? So let's think about the economy as a pie, all right? Everyone gets their own share from that economy. And so basically, we economists know that, or also the other people also know that, there are two factors of production: labor and capital. I mean, some people have leisure and they forego leisure and they work, in return they get some wage. And some people have capital, they incorporate this factor into production, they get some return, right? So for a long time, the income is divided between the capital owners and labor owners. So we can just define the society as a capitalist and laborist. And so as you can see, maybe 65% of the total income is going to labor, the rest is going to capital. This figure also encouraged Cobb and Douglas to construct the most famous production function that we call Cobb-Douglas production function in economics literature. And it is like that in the long run. Here the question is, you may ask, where is the profit, right? I mean, at the end of the day, firms generate some profits, but why we couldn't see this profit here? Because it's not theoretical, it's an empirical thing, by the way. In the long run, all profits boil down to zero. Why? Because it's redistributed. I'm not saying it's redistributed through some tax system or by the hand of government. It's redistributed through the dynamic mechanism of technological progress. Okay, some firms gain profits and they use it for invest and innovate, and they just spend it. Or if they fail to innovate, some other startup or some other entrepreneurial spirit comes up somewhere around there and just take the share of that firm. And again, this profit is redistributed. And everything is okay. This is the way of functioning of capitalism. It's beautiful, it's magical. And it runs well, maybe, I don't know, until 1980s. But what happened? So, I a little bit distort the results of Barkay. It's a very elegant paper, and he and his colleagues and the other related studies call this new income share as a factorless income, because this is the share of income which is not going to any of the factor of production, not labor, not capital, okay? This means that profits cannot be redistributed for some time. It's concentrated in the hands of some maybe technology firms, because this is a symptom of that. The diffusion of technology has slowed down, okay, maybe over 30 or 40 years. So, which means that some people hold the valuable knowledge in their hands, and there are very limited number of people. I'm saying people, but that you understand, they could be firms or the shareholders of those firms. So what's the problem with that one? If we cannot redistribute profit, it's concentrated in the very top, okay? This is just a figure of income share going to top 1% of income earners. So here you can see world, and I support the US, China, United Kingdom. And for all these countries, income inequality has been increasing. Okay, and maybe you can see that it's reached some level, maybe it converges to some equilibrium, I don't know. But it has increased. It's alarming, okay? And some brilliant people in economics literature say that this is because of that. This profit is going to some limited number of shareholders, and they just, just hold very large part of the economy, and these people earn, payments, let's say that, or they just earnings. There's a very huge gap between what they earn and what the ordinary citizen earns. Okay, this will create much more bigger or amplify the income disparity across income groups. So how to fix that? So it's proposed that maybe we can fix it through tax system by applying more progressive income tax. Also, we can establish wealth tax. And other type of redistribution mechanisms are direct and indirect transfers. For example, cap the ratio of top earners paid to median workers' pay is an option. And also there is universal basic income, is just a direct transfer to the people. And also market regulations. Because now we don't know it very well, we know it possibly, but the rising market power of these firms very much related with maybe rising income inequality. So that's why antitrust enforcements I'm encouraging to small entrepreneurs to enter to the market so that we can spread or diffuse the technology across different parts of the industry, and so antitrust enforcement may help to just mitigate income inequality. That's fine. What will we do is adding something here, an alternative additional redistribution mechanism. So I have to give the credit to Gavin. Actually, it's his idea, but it's very impressive. And so we're in the beginning, but we have to think about it. We call it through ownership. We can redistribute some part of this profit, if not all, and it's called stock for data. So, why stock for data? So before just explaining the basic idea of this proposition, let me give you some hint about ad revenues of big tech companies. Okay, their ad revenues, maybe, I don't know, constitute of 1/4 of their revenues which is really big, by the way. Why is important for us? Because those firms are able to track and analyze personal data, and this has led to a rise in targeted advertising and personalized content. So this how can I say that, this opportunity or this ability give those firms to capture maybe half of the global ad revenue. Okay? So in this way, those firms capitalize the data, the personal data, and they just create some, generate some profit over there, broadly speaking. But the problem is that ad revenues could be the tip of the iceberg, because personal data is an important input in designing various types of smart tech-based products and services. Okay? For the time being, we couldn't prove that empirically, but from our daily routine we know it, right? So the usage of personal data could be pervasive across industries other than IT, okay? Not Amazon or Netflix, Meta, Google, maybe not just them. There are other, there might be other firms using this technology intensively, okay? So, given that this proposition, the basic idea of Stock for Data is that, okay, we provide data, all of us, almost freely maybe, but we are the legal, not even real, legal owner of data. So, and also there's a potentially huge amount of profit generated from data collecting and processing, but far too little compensation for the data. Some of you may ask that, okay, we provide this data, but we just use their applications, so it's not it's not free. In return, they just provide some service to us. Okay, maybe it's priced in the upstream economy, but we are not sure that it's priced efficiently. Okay? So, the idea here is that why those companies just give some of their share to the data providers, okay? So if they can do that, if they will be willing to do that, there are some prospective benefits over there. Because it may increase financial participation in areas of ownership, which is good for all of us, not just for the big tech companies. And it potentially increases social welfare from the perspective of policymakers. And in supplementary to other distribution mechanisms, it may help to mitigate income disparity across income groups. Okay? So there are similar schemes, of course, to that. Why we are proposing that? Well, because there are similar schemes. We know that they are successful. For example, employee share ownership. As a widespread implementation, as popularity is just going to increase over time. Okay, it's adopted by many more businesses over time. And studies show that this employee share ownership increases productivity and motivates employees to adopt new skills. So also increase the retention rate. Which basically contribute to accumulation of human capital within the firm. Okay? So these studies are generally document such macroeconomic metrics, what happened in such macroeconomic metrics. And it seems that they are really successful, by the way. The firms that are applying the sort of share ownership shows a better performance than the other firms that do not adopt this scheme. And also there's customer share ownership, which is basically a financial agreement between the customer and the firms. And the customers, they do this agreement with the firm that they purchase frequently from. But I didn't see any, very rigorous study about the outcome of this customer share ownership. If you know any, your comments, your additions are very welcome, by the way. So, on this, given that we know employee share ownership can be very successful, also is successful maybe, is stock for data applicable? We can ask this question. Yes, why not? It might be. But I accept that there are some limitations, by the way. So what are these? First, legislative issues, because we may encounter the realm of legislation, even data protection and those sort of kind of things are under, in the concept of regulations and legislation and sort of things. So I'm not very familiar the legislation, by the way. First issue is that, and second one, conceptual issues. Actually, the first question that came into my mind when the government just, for the first time, said that why can't we just work on stock for data? What is data? So what is the content? Is it voice? Is it video? Is it just beats? I mean the 0101 beats. So how can we value it? And how the variation of value across data change. We don't know that one. But as Gavin said, the Rome wasn't built in a night, in a day. So it's just a beginning, maybe. But beyond that, there's another limitation, which is rather practical. Voluntary participation in this proposed system by both data providers and data collecting and processing firms. Oops, I don't think so. Oops, what happened? I am sorry. Okay, sorry, these ones are just slide a little bit down. They should be over there. So at least we can say something doing some empirical research, right? Maybe it's hard to an economy-wide research because we know that everyone will not be willing to participate in such system at the first place. Maybe when they just see the results, maybe the participation rate will increase in the future, we don't know. But at least we can just prove it. It's beneficial for all of us, for data providers, for firms, for the prospectively for the well-being of the society. Okay, maybe we can do some impact evaluation analysis using a sample of firms that are volunteer to participate in such systems. And it could be an experimental analysis, and after that we can compare different outcomes in terms of various macroeconomic metrics. Think about that. If you find that there's some technology firms providing shares to data providers or giving shares to data providers shows tremendous increase in the market capitalization. Maybe it could be some incentive for the other firms to do the same thing, okay? But of course, as I say, I came with the questions, I don't come with the answers, so still we're searching the methodology, the way of research, those kind of questions. Even we try to purify the question itself. But let me give the preliminary conclusion. Okay, there's a stylized fact over there. The rise of factorized income, which means the accumulation of profit in the hands of few firms or few people, shareholders, and it's not redistributed. So there are some redistribution mechanisms. Okay, it's great. And but also these tech giants may play a part in the rise of factorless income through various channels, I don't know, such as rising markups, decreasing labor share, which results in increasing income inequality. But the point here is that these firms, unsurprisingly, develop their designs heavily based on personal data collected. So we can use this, right? So I just talked about some redistribution mechanisms, tax system, and wealth tax, and those sort of things. But we can add to this something novel and something experimental, but also could be beneficial, which is stock for data, right? Through this mechanism, maybe we can just redistribute some part of the proposal, if not all. But it worth a try. At least it's worth to research on it and see the results. Thank you so much.
I have a question. There was something I didn't understand earlier in your presentation. Could we go back to the slide which has the orange 14%?
This?
That's it. We're saying that on the left, this thing which I think at the end you described as factorless income wasn't present. So my first question is, what changed? And how do you explain the very rich of before 1980? And what about the Rockefellers? Are we saying they were different from the very rich of today?
Maybe for some time, the same thing might happen in every phase of the technological revolution. Maybe Rockefeller also just concentrated some part of the profit in a sense, but in the long run it's redistributed. But it's been 40 years, and it's not just narrowing; it's just getting bigger. This is the issue.
If I may follow that up, if you're saying what the further slide suggests, which is the very rich are getting very much richer, I understand that. What I don't understand is the suggestion that there was something structural in the economy that changed, which turned the analysis on the left into something different in the analysis on the right. I don't understand the difference.
Okay. First of all, let me just say that I a little bit morph the results of Barkey in order to make it understandable. In the first one, as I said before, the profits is boiled down to zero because some firms use these profits to invest in R&D or invest in new physical capital. New machines, and if they fail to innovate, the new firms can just come up and take their part, and through this way, the new firms enter into the market, and the profit again redistribute between the players. The problem here is that the technology diffusion is very slow. The entry is blocked, which possibly led to the concentration of valuable knowledge in very few firms, okay? Like Google, Meta, Facebook, Tencent, or I don't know, many more, Alibaba, for example. So this is not my idea, this is not my proposition, I just try to tidy up what is said in the literature. There are lots of discussion over there. It's a new area flourishing, by the way. They try to understand why this factorless income rise.
So, stop me if I'm going on too long, but for this to work, you've just said that technology diffusion is getting slower.
Yes.
And the entrepreneurial growth of new enterprises funded by these very rich people is disappearing?
Not funded by them, but the potential competitors cannot enter market anymore. Because normally when a new technology emerges, it's spread out across different, it diffuses. So the capitalism owes too much to that one. It takes time, but it diffuses, we know that. But for some time, since 1980s, this diffusion is rather sluggish, has been just slowed down. And so this is going in parallel to the lower rate of entry in market. So these might be the symptom of, as I said, the valuable knowledge, the technology, maybe is in the hands of very limited number of firms. But these are symptoms. They need rigorous proof, and they are still in phase of discussion.
Elena, I think stock for data is a really interesting idea. I want to just slightly put a health warning on lumping all the tech giants together. There's probably a bit of a distinction between the likes of Facebook and Google, where quite literally you are the product and it's a bit of a deal with the devil where you get it for free, versus maybe an Apple where they've actually put a big focus on the privacy on your device and introducing all these controls to stop your data being given automatically to all these tracking firms. So would there be an issue perhaps over time that if we start taxing the likes of Facebook and Google by making us give us shares, they have to start charging us for their product? Or do you think there's perhaps a big enough share of profit that you can do both?
To be honest, I don't know, but it could be you're proposing something hybrid of the tax system and stock for data, as I understand, right?
Well, I mean, you might get out of these companies some shares for using Facebook and Google and use our data to give us a product. But there is going to be a cost to that. So either they're going to have to start charging us, or we're going to have to start reducing their profits. Maybe we can do both.
Okay, you say that we can, in a bad way we can incentivize them to just participate in the system. I don't know, it could be, yeah. Thank you very much.
How do you quantify the value of an individual person's data? Everybody's going, some people have data that's more valuable than others for all sorts of reasons. How do you distinguish what the value is of a particular person's data? And if what you're trying to avoid is the government simply taking a big tax and trying to make, apply it for the judgment of people who happen to be running the government at the time, rather than what was being suggested earlier, which is disintermediation, and actually that money comes directly to the person whose data it is there something simply that you're looking to do more research to work out how to do that, or is there already theories about how you do that? Because it's going to be also differentially valuable to different firms.
Yeah, exactly.
There is value of the data as an individual.
There's a heterogeneity over there. So, no, I didn't quantify it. As I say, it's the very beginning of even if the research question. But also it's really hard to quantify such thing. Because we don't know in what amount the value creation those data has led to.
You have a theory about how you're going to find that out?
No, no theory either.
If I could just...
Yeah, of course, please.
On that. Actually, this is a very, very relevant question, and it's really important. It's a really complicated and challenging question. Probably the best way to answer it, the way I'm looking at it at the moment, is if you look at the meta market capitalization over the last just over a year, there was a stage in late 2021 and early 2022 when I think it was first of all Google and then followed by Apple restricted the amount of data harvesting that Facebook was able to do. And it had a really significant impact on the market capitalization of Meta. I mean, you can look up these figures and see what impact it had. It was in terms of hundreds of billions of dollars. I mean, really, really substantial from that point of view. That's the first time we've actually had evidence of the quantification of the use of data. And I took the opportunity to write to Nick Clegg, who you know is number 2 to Cyclone, and basically asking if we could discuss with him Stop for Data on this basis. I wasn't expecting anywhere near a sort of receptive response. And to my surprise, the governance department in Meta showed a lot of interest in this, because what they're interested in is something which they describe as distributed governance, which isn't quite Stop for Data. It's more kind of what a building society does when it says that you, its customer, actually are one of its members, and you don't really feel what the value of that is. And actually, we had quite a debate about that. We had a number of conversations, 2 or 3 conversations, obviously all virtual, with Meta during last year about this. And I was hoping that they'd be able to take it much further. Unfortunately, they had to scale back their head office operations, their governance operations, and they didn't have the wherewithal to be able to develop it. But we need this kind of access and cooperation from big tech firms to do that quantification analysis. Obviously, it'd be great if it was Meta, but there are other firms as well. Take, for example, TikTok, which has been very much in the news over the last 2 or 3 weeks. Certainly we're putting out feelers towards TikTok to see whether they would be prepared to let us actually work with some of the data that they have in terms of how they use the data, how they harvest it, and what sort of impact it has on their market capitalization from that point of view. I mean, actually, I myself feel it might provide a route by which TikTok could say, look, if we're going to let everybody have shares, then there's no reason why government should block us out of allowing TikTok to have access to the US market or the UK market or whatever. So, I mean, there are ways in which we can practically research this, but we need to get feelers in there.
But my tiny follow-up is that one of the problems may be, though, in what you're wanting to do, Gary, is that the people whose data is most valuable are not necessarily the poorest in society. And if you're going to reward people based on the value of their data, clearly it will help, but the likelihood is that what you might call middle earners and higher earners are actually much more valuable to these firms than very low earners, because at the end of the day they're trying to advertise things to sell to them, and therefore it will help, but is it actually going to be distributed in quite the way you envisage?
Well, I understand what you're saying from that point of view, but data, of course, is not just a matter of what you put in or what you buy. It's your usage, and following everything you do, where you are, how you operate. When you go into a site on Google, so you suddenly find an advert coming up on something you're doing in a completely different area. And so we're not just talking about the data you put in, but actually the way it's used further downstream.
Please.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions actually. One is the question of how do you persuade big tech to give up a share of their profit, which is essentially what it is, because people like Jeff Bezos are not famous for their generosity towards their own employees, let alone their customers. And secondly, I've never heard, I think if I've understood this correctly, people described as data providers. Well, that's a new one on me. So I'm curious to know where privacy fits into this. Are we reduced to data providers?
Mm-hmm. I mean, these are exactly the other issues. we should address. We know that not lots of firms will be volunteer to participate, but we can, from the last discussion with the Gavin, we thought that maybe TikTok could be used because they are under some pressure in the US market. They just push them to just get out of the market. If we can just convince them that proposing and saying that maybe you can just introduce new scheme to the US regulatory body and saying that I'm sharing my profit through this scheme and let me stay in the market, broadly speaking. If we could find such firms, and also there are some other firms, not very giant, but they are tech firms, right? They want to share their data. They want to see what's going on in their firms. So this type of firms can be also used. We can start from the very beginning, and we just build something, putting on little by little, I don't know, maybe targeting at the first place to the tech giant might not be beneficial for our research. Maybe we can go for a middle size or rather small size companies to showing that this scheme, stock for data is good for everyone.
So with TikTok, you potentially have a specific lever. But I don't see the same issue with Amazon, Google, Meta.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a carrot and stick situation on this, which will be, I mean, the very fact that, people like Meta were interested in distributed governance does give some sort of indication that there's, an interest in exploring it. There's a lot to do further on down the track. I think your other question was really about the use of data and data protection and so on. I think, we will have to get into the nits and grits of exactly how we go about the issue of stock. I mean, it needs to be accepted. It can't just be an issue. We need to think about global administration in terms of stock there, because obviously different countries have different systems. It probably would be custodially based, a bit like global shares and employee share ownership. All of those things. But this is a much earlier stage than intergenerational rebalancing. We've got a lot of work to do in this area. Ronnie?
Just to throw some things in, I thought that the TikTok problem was more about the Chinese government and their access to the data. Back to strategic stuff with Meta, it's my understanding that because their revenues have kind of fallen quite significantly due to the stuff that Gavin was talking about, that they perhaps would be interested in some sort of new strategic approach that positions them as some sort of ethical fan. And the question I have, that was more of a statement than a question, is what's the business case when they can get this stuff for free? Because we are happily ignoring the EU LA and just whizzing to the bottom, pressing yes, and giving it away for free. So what's their business case? Because I work in a commercial environment, I've interviewed with some of these companies, and it's like free. So why would they choose to come on board?
Well, I think the regulators are right on top of this issue at the moment. Obviously there's antitrust, measures which are being considered by the American legislators from that point of view. They can see where the potential stick will come from, and that could lead to breakup of firms and so on. That's not necessarily, the way that a large tech firm would want to go. So I think, that it will be a combination of pressure as well as, interest and incentive and distributed governance. I mean, remember, ownership is not just about dilution. It's about actually allowing people a share in the governance of the way a firm is run. And I know you could say to me, I've worked in personal share ownership for a long time myself, that actually, personal share owners don't seem to have quite so much leverage as institutional share owners. I can assure you that if you attend an annual general meeting and you as a personal shareholder go and talk to the directors or chairman, they will give you as much attention as will be the institutional shareholders within it. you know, I mean, that governance process is important. It's not just the monetary side. And that's why I believe Meta were interested in exploring that further.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's worth working with.
Yeah, I find I'm deeply uneasy with this for a whole variety of reasons. The first is we've tortured some data and we found some rich firms and we've now found a way to tax them. Big deal, you know, you've done the same thing with the canals in your industrial revolution, you've done the same thing with the railways. These people are making a lot of money and they're doing it through network effects. Let's go and grab their money and do something with it. You then dress it up as a redistributive stuff. And you can't redistribute unless you can theoretically put a value on it. When you put a value on it, you drive yourself into the people who've got more valuable data. So the purpose you're claiming, which is redistribution, is a fiction. If I want to be blunt on that one. Somebody here was alluding to, you know, if you don't know who's paying, then you want the product. You know, it's a very, very apt one. It applies as it does in this country to current accounts, whereas there's a lot of other things you ought to be doing if this is really where you're trying to head, rather than just head for a mishmash of firms. And throwing Tesla in there with Meta is basically saying I've looked at people who've got high market caps and I want some of that cash. So I have that. I've also many deep problems with the red wedge, which makes no sense whatsoever. But let's imagine that this is a great idea and it is about redistribution. How are you going to redistribute it? So you've got two methods here. You either find a valuation, which you don't even have the first step of doing it. As somebody who produces data valuations, it's really difficult. I completely disagree with the example you gave on Meta's hit to the share price. That had a lot to do with competition. It had a lot to do with relative power. It was not a direct data hit. If you want a direct data hit, talk Cambridge Analytica. So you get down to this point here where, are you going to redistribute it on a variable basis, or is it just going to be a mishmash across society? So every individual gets £100 a year or something. And by the way, the numbers have been run, and they are something between $50 and $100 a year per American per Brit, something like that, roughly. The difficulty, though, is if you were trying to do that, and you were trying to handle the ethics of it, you just set up a data trust. It's the commonwealth. Why are you trying to attribute it to individuals? So these firms who are collecting data should be forced, perhaps, to provide anonymized data that would actually help things out. Now, you also made a point there about concentration and market share and all that. You're actually erecting a barrier to entry. You alluded to it yourself. There'll be a huge amount of effort required to prove to regulators you've got the data, that you're dishing it out fairly, blah, blah, blah. Smaller firms would find that very difficult to enter because I can't set up a small data collection firm until I've got this huge edifice meeting what the regulator requires me to provide. If you were to provide a data trust, you'd actually reverse things completely. We'd be saying there's a lot of common data out here. It's available to all of us as individuals, all of us as startup firms, all of us as major firms. I can get some of mine as Meta, I can use some of Apple's data, at least at the level that we've decided to do it, and the governance then becomes a political one. Now that is basically going back to where many of us were in the 60s and 70s, which is open data. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, of course, you've made some very important points there, Michael, but I think that, you know, what we're talking about here is keeping focused on disintermediation, because what you're describing is ways of being able to come up with collective solutions on this. Well, you know, I mean, economists have come up with collective solutions which governments have imposed for, you know, for centuries now. And what we're talking about in this whole project is individual empowerment. And that's why we need to keep actually focused on the disintermediation aspect of it. SOC does actually provide that opportunity.
Disintermediation was not mentioned in the entire presentation.
Not in that one, but it certainly was in mine earlier on.
Yeah, in yours, but what's this got to do with it?
I think disintermediation is a very, very key part of it. And STOP does give you the opportunity to work with that, if you could find a way of actually linking the kind of evaluation and the recipients of it. And I do know, I can see there's some big issues in front of us.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But, you know, it is about disintermediation, isn't it? Because otherwise you might as well just tax and hand it out of universal basic income.
Yes, sir.
Over the back there.
Yes, we have one online. Charles Breezer's posed an interesting scenario, which I think actually is very, very, very pertinent. Actually, he said current supply chains involve a number of intermediaries, the tech firms, which add little or no value to the standpoint of customers. Perhaps the exam question is how can we harness tech to provide value both to producers and consumers and reduce the profitability of intermediaries to equate to the value which they provide. But prior to that, he asked well other things. He just sent that one through whilst it wasn't one I was going to read out actually. He said, value of data, there's a variety of ways in which this could be rebated to individuals. So once a person, for instance, knows that they like Mars bars, why does that consumer have to then fund the sales and marketing cost price to each product when they actually could elect to receive a loyalty card from Mars, which gives a discount equivalent to the sales and marketing cost? So you're handing over one thing.
I'm very sorry.
Why are you getting it back in another way?
Sorry?
You're handing it over with one hand, but you should be able to receive it back in the other way.
How does Mars verify that you really are a high eater of Mars bars?
That's a good question.
How they can value the amount they're going to give you.
But if you have a card, like a discount card in the same way that you went to a coffee shop, they know you're coming back because by the number of stamps you're getting on your card, aren't they?
I think what you're describing is a number of discretionary systems that companies use to actually associate either discount structures or customer share ownership and stock ownership. I mean, I've been used to shareholder benefits, which people have had for a long time in some companies. There's about 65, 70 companies within this country in the UK which actually do issue shares or give benefits for their products linked to the number of shares that you hold. There are a lot of discretionary schemes like that, but what we're aiming towards is a structure which regulators can actually build on and adopt. And obviously it's a very early stage, but we've got to go through those questions. And I will take a detailed look at Charles Bree's comments there and think about it and discuss it with Seda separately. But,
exactly.
Yeah, that's right. It's a matter of trying to come up with a structure which will operate with the regulators as well. Yeah, sorry.
Has any research been done as to the effect of sovereign wealth funds and how they collect the money and how they use their money? I don't know. It's just an open question. Is that your way of
Sorry, I didn't get your question. Sorry?
Sovereign wealth funds, like for example, as I understand it, Norway sits on a very substantial sovereign wealth fund from its oil revenues gathered over the years. How is that used to benefit the people of Norway? That might be a way of pursuing an line of inquiry, I think.
I think it's a combination of investment and also every Norwegian gets a payment, sort of dividend every year, I think, of X, whatever X is.
Yes, I mean, Norway is one of the rare examples of a country which has been able to build up a sovereign wealth fund because of its oil riches from that point of view. I think, how that feeds back to the public benefit is probably through the government intermediation. I certainly think it's something which we should do a bit of study on and find out how that does work. But you don't get the same direct relationship between oil coming out of the ground and individuals living in Norway. Having said that, I think there is a Norwegian actually who's taking part in our conference today from Norway, so I will ask him what he feels about that. That's John Williamson. He may have some comments to make. But,
If redistribution is the ambition of this, and disintermediation is one of the key principles you're wanting to apply, I have a foggy memory of the Great British Gas sell-off, which Margaret Thatcher initiated, and the whole Where's Sid advertising campaign. But my memory is that it was very successful in terms of the number of people who bought shares, and I have heard anecdotally, and I have no evidence for it, maybe somebody else does, that subsequently almost everybody sold their shares, and they ended up in the hands of a very small number of people. And does that point towards the reality is that most people who are poor do not have the time or the inclination or the expertise to do anything with shares, even if you educate them hugely. They're just too busy putting food on the table to put their energy into managing shares or having the conversations you're talking about with the senior people at companies in whom they have shares?
Well, I have to say, I have been involved in most of the large privatisations between 1990 through to about the sort of 2000, and I know exactly what you're talking about. There is a surge of sentiment when they first come out. But the fact is that's where the education and information element comes in. And as we said in the earlier session on intergenerational rebalancing, you cannot just just do the distribution bit without doing the education part as well. It needs to both come in together. But at the end of the day, it is up to individuals what they choose to do with their assets. If somebody chooses to sell them and use them in a different way, it's up to them. It's a free world. And, you shouldn't try and chain them or structure them from that point of view.
No, but if redistribution is your aim.
Yeah.
But also we try to, from a social perspective, increase the awareness of ownership. This is part of the motivation of this preliminary project. So maybe, as you say, we cannot find anything over there. People will be very unwilling to do this thing. So this is also another result will be drawn from this research also. So just proving that through this mechanism, we couldn't just increase the awareness of ownership. So there might be other ways, but through this way, we couldn't find something can be said. So if we really want to approach the issue in a very scientific way, instead of recommending policy.
Okay, I think probably we should leave it there and move on for David.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your comments.